Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining today's Baby Bonds Task Force Report Release event. My name is Elena Van Tassel, and I am the Executive Director of the Office of Economic Empowerment and a Deputy Treasurer. I'll be hosting today's event, and we have a full program ahead for you. We'll begin today's event with special remarks from State Treasurer Deborah Goldberg. Next, we'll hear a message from our legislative champions, Senator Paul Feeney and Representative Andy Vargas. Then we'll cover the highlights of the task force findings report. And then we'll have a panel moderated by Task Force Chair Lisa Wong, which will discuss baby bonds and additional efforts to promote wealth equity in Massachusetts. But first, before we start the event, we'll have a little housekeeping. This is a Zoom webinar and will be recorded. It may be uploaded onto a public website, YouTube, and Facebook for future use. Any questions asked through the Q&A function will be anonymous. However, the chat function is not anonymous and is subject to public records law. This is a webinar and not a meeting. As such, you will not see the other participants during the event. The Q&A feature will be available throughout the webinar. Just a little background on the Office of Economic Empowerment. The Office of Economic Empowerment, known as OEE, is a department within the Office of the State Treasurer and Receiver General of Massachusetts. It's tasked with offering free and accessible financial education, promoting wage equality, and creating a bright future for children across the state. Our office delivers programs to all residents of Massachusetts and at every age of their lives, regardless of their economic background. Learn more by visiting our website, which is right there on the screen for you, and will also be in the chat. I will now turn it over to Treasurer Deborah Goldberg to kick off our event. Treasurer Goldberg.
Thank you so much, Elena. And before I start, I would like to thank Lisa Wong for stepping in and assuming the chair of this important initiative, and also to my dear friends, Senator Feeney and Representative Vargas, and all the Baby Bonds Task Force members. Without your efforts and without your passion, without your involvement, we would not have been able to move through this process as rapidly as we have, and then have something to present to all of you today. In fact, it's reminiscent of when I was first elected almost 8 years ago, and I introduced a financial literacy task force and let people know that we needed to have the recommendations and action plans within 6 months. And everyone looked at me like, that doesn't happen in state government. And now, not only did it happen then, but on other initiatives we've done, it's happened again. And in particular, with something this challenging and with the breadth of people that we've been able to engage, here we are ready to kick this off today. And I am so excited that we are releasing our report, the Baby Bonds Task Force report. So I want to remind you, it was just in March that we put a call out on looking to have solution-based leaders join us. And now here we are launching our Baby Bonds Task Force report. I know I'm being repetitive, but it goes, you really got to think about how quickly we got that done. And in 2020, we launched our Baby Step Savings Plan. Since then, over 21,000 families have started on their pathway to planning for a child's future educational expenses. Our team has experience with creating initiatives that help those most impacted by structural inequities, and particularly towards building assets. And we're so proud of the work we do with Baby Steps, but we know Baby Bonds will complement this initiative and drive us to do even more to close the racial wealth gap. I made this call to action and you listened. Our email boxes were flooded with messages of people saying, what can I do to help? First, we brought on former State Treasurer Shannon O'Brien to lead this initiative. And when she stepped down due to her appointment as chair of the Cannabis Control Commission, I can't begin to tell you how excited I was that Lisa Wong, who is now South Hadley Town Administrator, but has had an incredibly esteemed career, and that she was willing to step in and take us across the finish line. Lisa has a wealth of experience in fiscal management and governance, not to mention a track record of moving the needle forward for families all over our state. Lisa, I'm going to repeat it again. thank you for doing this. I, better than anyone, know how much you have on your plate. We've been working with national leaders like Dr. Derek Hamilton at the New School and Shira Markoff at Prosperity Now, and alongside policymakers who are exploring baby bonds programs in other cities and states. My legislative partners, you never say no. Whenever we come up with great ideas, you're all in. And believe me, everyone, to have that kind of steadfast leadership on this kind of initiative is really essential. By the way, I've heard your staff members, Keith and Mallory, are on speed dial with my team. I think we're going to just have a direct connection, not even need to dial. We structured our task force into 4 subcommittees, and I want to thank the chairs of these subcommittees. Again, Senator Feeney and Keith Drucker, former Treasury team member, Keenan Grooms, I told you you couldn't get away, and MassCap's Joe Diamond, Brandeis University's Dr. Tom Shapiro, and Gear Up's Robert Deas, another former Treasury team member, Drew Smith, and Dr. Peter Tufano of the Harvard Business School. Today's report is the culmination of the tremendous research, organization, and determination of the entire task force, our Treasury staff, and our interns. Their work has provided Massachusetts with the foundation to enact a fiscally sound baby bonds program that could provide life-changing assets for future generations of Massachusetts residents. So before I turn it over to OEE's Executive Director, Elena Van Tassel, I want to say something. I said this with our Financial Literacy Task Force. I said the work is just beginning. And that was the case then. That had 22 recommendations. We enacted them all. Now we need you to do the same. We need you to share this report with your legislators and colleagues. Keep the conversation going. We know how things get done, and it has to be a groundswell of support and a sense of urgency where we can engage people and make it unacceptable if the program doesn't move forward. So we have an exciting day ahead of us. And I want to thank our panelists for taking time to share your insights today. Elena, I'm going to turn it back to you, but I look forward to working with all of you till we see this baby bonds program kicked off and on its way to changing lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Treasurer, and thank you for your leadership on this issue. I am now going to turn it over to our legislative champions, Senator Feeney and Representative Vargas, for their remarks.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Elena. Good morning, everyone. I am so excited to be here today to discuss the findings of our report in the Baby Bonds program. But first, I'd really like to just thank and acknowledge Treasurer Goldberg, who we just heard from, for her vision and for her steadfast dedication to creating an effective and meaningful, fiscally responsible and efficient baby bonds program in Massachusetts, and for her collaborative approach, not only to this report, but the resulting legislation and what we know will be a game changer for families in the Commonwealth for generations to come. Thank you as well to Elena Van Tassel and her entire team at the Office of Economic Empowerment for their work. To my friend and colleague, Representative Vargas, for leading the effort in the House. To the panelists we will hear from shortly for their expertise, for all of the members that were part of this task force, and especially for the leadership of Task Force Chair Lisa Wong, who stepped up when we needed her the most. And finally, to the members of the Subcommittee on Eligibility and Funding, which I had the distinct honor to chair, for their time, their effort, their expertise in contributing to this report. You'll find as we discuss this report today that if you believe like I do, the process is just as important as the product. We know where we're heading and what this can mean for families. But the process that was involved in actually contributing to this report meant that we had discussions, real discussions, about the wealth gap, about where we saw problems that needed to be addressed. So those discussions and those conversations meant a lot to not only to this report, but to the program in the days and weeks and months and years ahead. You know, when Treasurer Goldberg came to me earlier this year about creating a program with the goal of taking meaningful steps to narrow wealth inequalities, with a particular focus on shrinking the racial wealth gap, I knew immediately that I was all in. She spoke with such passion about the work that we had in front of us. And I was eager to get to work on creating an impactful program that will help us tackle barriers to economic development and success for all residents in the Commonwealth. By automatically investing from day one of a child's life, we can provide a jumpstart to individuals who are otherwise today at a disadvantage. We can begin to narrow the racial wealth gap and give our most vulnerable residents a fighting shot at the middle class and the American dream. I view this task force, this report, and the journey that we are on toward passing legislation as an opportunity for all of us to dream big. Think about it. The child born into poverty in Massachusetts today, that by the age of 18, because of the work that we're about to engage in, has accumulated enough wealth to begin college, launch their career, start a business, buy a home, or even continue to let that investment mature as they start their lives with an economic safety net that does not exist today. Working with the treasurer, I look forward to filing this legislation in the state Senate this session. And more than that, I'm committed to working with my colleagues to make this a priority, to lift people up, to give them hope, to build wealth from the bottom up and the middle out, to put hardworking residents on a trajectory for wealth creation and opportunity from day one. This program and these bills will take a movement, but they say that a movement is made up of a series of moments like today, on a Monday afternoon, when we come together to release this report, knowing that we have so much work ahead of us, but together we can accomplish it. So I want to thank you again, Madam Treasurer. I want to thank your team, to everybody that's been involved in this task force. Your work is truly making a difference. And I know that once we introduce this legislation this year, so many more people are going to come together to make this a priority and get this done. So thank you all for taking the time to be here today and for being a part of this going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Feeney. I'm now going to turn it over to Representative Andy Vargas.
Thank you so much. And Senator Feeney just said it best. There's not much more to add to that, but I just really wanted to thank Treasurer Goldberg and your entire team for being so intentional about the team that you put together. I think it speaks volumes to what your priorities are, and that you were able to bring together a diverse team to come up with concrete, tangible, and real actionable policy that we can move forward. And so that's a testament to your leadership, Treasurer Goldberg. And it's been an honor to work with you and Senator Feeney, your staff, and the entire task force on the report and the legislation that we'll come forth with. I'm proud to be joining Senator Feeney in sponsoring this legislation next session, and I'm excited to get to work on it, to do the work that's necessary to build a movement so that this not only becomes a priority amongst us here that are on the Zoom, but really becomes a movement outside the building and across the state, as Senator Feeney mentioned. This bill is the result of months of work and deliberation by a diverse set of experts who made sure to center those who'd be most impacted by this legislation in their work. And that's so crucial that we center folks with lived experience in this work. And many of us are obviously aware of the study conducted by the Boston Fed, which has been cited multiple times, where the median net worth of Black households in the greater Boston area was just $8 compared to over $247,000 for white households. And by the way, for Dominican families, where my family comes from, the Dominican Republic, it was $0. And, in that study of all non-white groups categorized in the study, the group with the highest median wealth's average amount of wealth was just 5% of the average amount of wealth in white households. We see these trends across many different data points.
I think we might have lost Representative Vargas, but I want to just thank Senator Feeney and Representative Vargas for their leadership. I'm now going to go over the recommendations from the task force. And great. There I am right on the screen. But first, before I go over the recommendations, I just want to give you some background on the timeline and the process. As Treasurer Goldberg mentioned, she put a call out in March for the task force to create and finalize recommendations. The group started meeting in June. At that time, they broke up into 4 different subcommittees. The subcommittees are eligibility and funding, building financial capability and engagement, accessing and using baby bonds, trust management, oversight and operations was the 4th subcommittee. And the 5th group on community participation also met. And this had representatives from various subcommittees because community participation was identified as being a topic that overlapped. It was really crucial to the task force's work. So now we'll dive into the actual recommendations. So the first subcommittee, eligibility and funding. The task force recommends that children who are enrolled in transitional aid to families with dependent children, TAFDC, at any time prior to turning 1 year old will be eligible for baby bonds at maturity. Children under the age of 1 in the Department of Children and Families foster care system will also be automatically included in the baby bonds program. Enrollment in the baby bonds program is to be automatic, and efforts should be made to establish a sustainable source of funding for baby bonds that will ensure the program's longevity. The second subcommittee, building financial capability and engagement. The task force recommends early, consistent, and targeted engagement with baby bond participants and their families. A community advisory committee consisting of agencies, school systems, resource providers, community-based grassroots organization, among others, shall exist to convene a statewide network of support and connect resource providers to baby bond participants and their families. The task force also supports Treasurer Goldberg's bill, an act requiring financial education in schools. That is a bill that requires schools in Massachusetts to offer financial education, as well as targeted financial education for baby bond participants and their families. Moving on to the 3rd subcommittee, accessing and using baby bonds. The task force recommends fund distribution at age 18 and terminating at age 35. Allowable uses of the funds shall be limited to wealth building activities that will either be prescribed in legislation or will be prescribed in future regulations. These wealth building activities should include assistance in house buying, post-secondary education, including technical and vocational training, starting or expanding a business, saving for retirement, any other investment in financial assets or human development that provides long-term gains to wages and wealth as determined by the treasurer. And allowable uses should also include expenses that support wealth-building activities, such as investing in a car to be able to attend post-secondary education. The task force also recommends that the treasurer may prescribe regulations relating to cases where participants may be unable to use the funds within the allowable timeframe. An example of this would be military service or incarceration. All right, moving on to the 4th subcommittee, trust management, oversight, and operations. The task force recommends to establish a trust that invests in a single omnibus account with appropriate risk characteristics. It's critical to connect and engage individuals with their respective accounts to facilitate a relationship between baby bonds and their recipients and to allow for the updating of personal information. These actions would make it verification at the time of withdrawal much easier. The task force also recommends that participation in the baby bonds program may not preclude parents, caregivers, or the baby bonds participants from receiving state and federal benefits, and baby bond funds should not be counted as taxable income. Those are the high-level recommendations from the task force. I am now going to turn it over to our task force chair, Lisa Wong, to moderate our panel discussion. Lisa?
Great. Thank you so much. I first want to thank Treasurer Goldberg for making that call a few months ago. And she knew I had just had a baby, so I couldn't say no to anything that had the word baby in it. And I think we know how strongly something like this is to leave a legacy behind for generations to come, so that we know that the work we're doing and investing in our youth is going to pay those dividends that are going to help close that racial wealth gap, and just be a great tool moving forward for all of us to work on together. So speaking of together, having stepped into this sort of midway through the stream, I do want to pay tremendous respect to Shannon O'Brien, who may or may not be on the call. I think I saw her name, but she really brought this great team together. They're well underway. When I came in, these 4 task force just provided so much knowledge. They were well dispersed in terms of their background geographically. And it was just such an honor to step in and see what great work was being done. I also want to thank the staff. I know the staff was mentioned a number of times, and I apologize if I don't get all of you, but Elena, Daphne, Samantha, Sarah, Armando, Alexa, Robin, Emily, Jack, Alberto, and again, I apologize if I'm missing some, but as you can see, what a great group of people that were supporting all of us throughout this process. I also want to thank Senator Feeney. And I know Keith Drucker from his office is also on the call and helped to chair one of the committees. Rep. Vargas, again, thank you for your support. We're going to need that continued partnership as we move this forward in the legislative season. We're going to need to really think about consistent and sustainable funding sources, and also just all of your support to make sure that this is something that's widely known and widely accepted, because we hope this is going to be a great tool for years to come. So I also want to thank this fantastic team of panelists who are great leaders from across the state for agreeing to spend their precious time answering questions about this report and their experience. So our panelists, we have 3 on today, and I'll ask them to unmute and also turn on their videos. But first we have Beth Mattingly, who's the Assistant Vice President of Community Development Research and Communications at the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston. Thank you, Beth. We also have Lamari Lopez, who's the Advocacy Coordinator at the YWCA of Southeastern Massachusetts. And we have Robert Days, who's the Statewide Director for Gear Up at the Massachusetts Department of Higher Education. So my first question is going to be directed to all of the panelists. And we'll start with Beth. I'm going to ask you, why do we need an asset building program in addition to the programs that provide income assistance?
Thanks so much, and thanks for having me here today. I need to start with the standard Fed disclaimer. My views expressed today represent those of myself only, not the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston, the Federal Reserve System, or its Board of Governors. So the question, I think, is about why we need assets, why we're focusing on these. And I see these as falling into 2 buckets. One is sort of the buffer function, and that's particularly evident in times like this where we're seeing prices rise rapidly. Those who have some savings that they can draw on can help buffer what might otherwise be quite disruptive as they see their grocery bill or their fuel bills going up. The other is to buffer sort of unexpected shocks in a family budget. When I was doing research in rural Maine, I heard repeatedly about the need for flexible funds. For example, a car repair. People often drive to work. If their car transmission goes, they may be at risk of losing their jobs, detaching from the labor force if they can't come up with the money to fix it, which of course will have ripple effects later. So that buffer for helping people to stay connected to resources, stay employed. And the other, and I think the focus of this task force with the baby bonds, is on the role of wealth in providing a set of resources to access opportunities, to fund higher education, to buy a first home, to open a small business. And that those with wealth have a much easier time getting started, get a sooner foot in the door, have to take on less debt, and so forth.
Great, thank you so much, Beth. Lamari, I'm going to turn this over to you. Same question. Why do we need an asset building program in addition to programs that provide income assistance?
I just want to say, first of all, thank you so much for having me here, having me on the panel to have this very important conversation and discussion. I'll be really transparent. It gives hope. It gives opportunity for long term. It gives something to look forward to. It really helps families to begin to understand their life and how it's going to help their families. It gives direction, it gives a future, something to look forward to, something that they can help their families, at a young age to prepare them for life. It's something that a lot of families didn't already have in their life. They didn't have a stepping stone or something that was available for them to be successful. And this really gives them a chance to be successful. It gives direction. It gives a purpose, so just having that there really will change their way of thinking early on in life. And then when they are allowed to be able to process this, it's really going to change their mindset on how they can really live their life and be as proactive as they can be. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for that insightful answer. Robert, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Lisa, Treasurer Goldberg, and everyone else on this having this important conversation. I was inspired by both of the two panelists, and I was thinking about the role that Gear Up Massachusetts plays. We're a part of the Department of Higher Education, and we're a federally funded TRIO program, and often we're on the front lines with school counselors, working with students.
Robert, I think you froze. Wasn't sure if it was me or you, but can you hear us? Okay, I'm gonna wait. Oh, Robert, there you are.
My apologies. We will see if we can keep this going without my unstable internet connection, which just seems like lunchtime is when it wants to take a break. So simply put, we work with students as they are entering both the transitioning to high school and then also to post-secondary education. And Beth spoke about it really well, eloquently, about the fact that oftentimes $200 makes a difference as to whether a student maintains enrollment in an institution of higher education or not. And that goes unseen when we report statistics on college enrollment, college persistence. But we know that those small interruptions can make a tremendous difference. So we see baby bonds as a way to support student aspirations, both in the future as one of my colleagues just talked about, but also bridging the gap along the way and ensuring that small incidences don't derail someone's future. So I see this as a tremendous step forward for the Commonwealth and a tremendous investment in the neediest students and families that we serve. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for that great answer. All right, this question is going to be directed at Beth. So Beth, in discussing wealth inequity in Massachusetts, we often cite the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston's Color of Wealth report, which states that the median net worth for a Black family in Massachusetts is $8. We understand that the Fed is working on a new report regarding wealth inequity in the state. And this was a report that was referenced by Rep. Vargas earlier in his remarks. Beth, can you discuss these changes, if any, that you anticipate in the new report? How do you believe the findings will bolster the argument for a baby bonds proposal? And what more can be done to address the issue?
Thanks. Sure. I'm really excited about the new Massachusetts Wealth Survey, and it is a partnership between the Boston Fed, the Boston Foundation, the Barr Foundation, Eastern Bank Charitable, and the Chamber of Commerce. So there's broad investment and broad interest in this project. Some of the big changes from the Color of Wealth that was released in 2015 include a larger sample. That sample size in total was about 500 residents of the Boston MSA. We're looking to get about 5,000 respondents across the state of Massachusetts, which is super exciting. That will allow us to do several things. One is to give more precision around the wealth numbers. That $8 figure that's widely cited has a very wide margin of error, about $12,000, suggesting that we know wealth is low for the US-born Black population, but we're not sure exactly where it falls within that range. And we're also able to look at more racial and ethnic groups. With a larger sample, we can get at beyond US-born Black, white comparisons. We're striving to include a broad swath of the population and to really be able to speak to some nuanced disparities. Now, the extent to which we'll be able to do so depends how well we're able to oversample in the population, but we're certainly aspiring to. As I've said, this is going to be across Massachusetts. So we'll be able to look at disparities across the entire state within the Boston MSA And we're hoping among the gateway cities as an aggregate group. And in addition to looking at that median number, we want to look at the full distribution within and between racial and ethnic groups so that we can look at what is the 90th percentile of wealth? What is the 10th percentile? What share of people have no net wealth or negative net wealth? So that we have a more granular and more nuanced portrait going beyond just sort of one measure of disparity, but looking across at different measures and different metrics to see and have a more colorful picture. We're also hoping to get at some of the sources of disparity, how people bought their first home. Did they get a money through an in vivo transfer or an inheritance? Did they have to borrow money? Did they save it through their own employment and income? Throughout this, we're taking a structural lens, recognizing that there are practices and policies that have enabled the wealth divide for centuries and decades, and thinking about what that means and what those implications are. And one of the big things that I'm really excited about is that we're thinking of this as creating a tool for modeling the potential impact of policy and practice changes. And that will allow us to do some quantification of things like the baby bonds proposal. And in the report, you talk about the low, medium, and high potential proposals that would be out there and what those would mean, not only for costs to the state, but for accumulation for individuals over time. We would do similar modeling in our data and incorporate that into the full nexus of wealth portraits and think about what such a proposal might mean. So we're not poised yet to say what these metrics are and what these numbers are, but we're excited to have a tool where we could do some of that sophisticated modeling.
Great, Beth, and I just dropped the link to bostonfed.org, which has the Color of Wealth publication. It only lets me download it, so I'm sure there's a way to Google it and get it there as well. Do you anticipate when the next report is coming out?
Yes, we are aiming for the end of 2024. We're in the process of looking at proposals from survey firms and anticipate that the data will be collected throughout 2023, cleaned and analyzed and presented in 2024.
Great, thank you so much. And thank you, Jack, for dropping the link as well. So Robert, I'm going to direct the next question to you. A significant aspect of the baby bonds proposal is engagement with families and communities, particularly within the context of the educational system across the state. So what are some successful models of engagement that we could adapt to the baby bonds program? So what are some key features of engagement that are necessary for the success of the program? And how can schools serve as a key touch point in communicating about the program and the resources it can provide?
Thank you, Lisa. Well, one of the first things and one of the incredible challenges of being on this panel was we had to peer into the future 18 years. And that's the first thing I want to start with. And we had some robust conversations about what might be effective today as far as communicating and engaging parents and students may not necessarily be the best way to do it in 2040. So that was one thing that we struggled in a healthy way with, making sure that the principles of engaging families and partners in the community would always be at the core of this. So as we peeled it back, I mean, and I'm out of the Office of Student Financial Assistance out of the Department of Higher Education, where we just through the Mass Aid system launched a texting platform to assist with students completing FAFSAs, because our goal is to increase the number of students who do that. So we leverage that tool, and we've seen a great response with regards to families and students engaging with that. So that's a potential strategy. We also partner oftentimes with both other organizations like DESE with regards to parent engagement. But then I think the most effective partnerships are those that engage both our community-based partners, organizations like the YMCA, like many others across the Commonwealth. I'm not going to include them all because there's so many of them that do tremendous work on all this, but so that we're always including the local voices and the families and the students and those who are literally doing the work and involved in it. And making sure that the funding is available to just ensure that the word is getting out. And also making sure that it's tiered at all the different stages. So whether it's early education, middle school, higher school, or high school or post-secondary education, just structuring a method of engagement that is varied and also inclusive. But essentially, as we peer into the future, again, We wanted to just make sure we maintain a broad perspective because many of the tools that may be effective may be obsolete within the next decade, if not more. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. And I think it's key to emphasize that engagement is going to be a major part of our measurement of success for this program. The report is done. Certainly, we're going to be working with the legislature on funding, but the first cohorts, won't be 18 for a number of years. So in between now and then, there's so many things that can change, and there's so many great community organizations that we want to have continuously engaged in the process. So I do want to emphasize that even though a lot of work has been done, there's a tremendous work ahead, and all of that is going to be that open communication and dialogue with all of the groups that are engaged in this work comprehensively in the state. All right, so the next question is going to go to Lamari. How can we ensure that community voices from across the state, but particularly from those areas that are most deeply affected by systemic inequality, are heard in both the development of this program and throughout the legislative session, and as I discussed, throughout this whole process?
Thank you, Lisa. Well, one thing that I can say to begin, like you guys already mentioned in the format, grassroots communication, building relationships. I think that's the first thing. Instead of also going to them, we really need to think about where these families are, where we can go to them, where we can build a relationship, where we can really listen to them, listen to their struggles and what they're really going then, and then provide this program to them, letting them know that we have this available for them, that how it is, explain it to them in their vocabulary, in their language, for them to, you guys have it really nice put, but we really need to think about the way that they're going to access this information, how we can provide them the best simple information for them to really understand. And really, they need to sit at this table with us. They need to hear what we are doing, the work that we have done, what we continue to do, what we continue to do for them, really allowing them to really be here with us, for them to really see what we have done, why we have been allowed to do this, the struggle that we have seen them going through, really allowing them to tell us what their needs are, and really showing them what we have put together and the things that we have, how it's really going to help their family, how it's going to help their future. Step by step, I think this is something that we need to acknowledge, that they need to know this step by step. It can't be like, just a format. It needs to be talked about step by step, where we are, where we're going, what's the next step, what's going to happen in the future, what's going to happen when the children become the age where they're allowed to get this money. It really needs to be a process, and they need to know about it every step of the way, so that they feel like they are also a part of it, like their voices are being heard, like what we're trying to create is something that we thought about them when we wanted to create this. We want to let them know that this is about the community. This is about poverty. This is about changing their lives and making it a better way of living. But we really need them to understand that we can't do the work without them. We are really here to advocate for them. We're here to guide them and listen, to use our voices, but we want them to use their voices too. We want to hear their stories. We want to hear their struggles. We want to hear how this is going to change their life. And once it changes their life, we also want to be able to celebrate that. We want to come back and come with them and allow them to tell us what we have done to change their life. From the very beginning, I just think about a mother being pregnant and just struggling as a single mother, not knowing how she's going to provide for her child once the child is born, but knowing that we already have something in system that's going to help their children when they are older. Something else that I think about, especially with families that I serve, we are caregivers to our families. We are caregivers to our parents, so this will allow us to think of things differently, to take this money and say, what can we do with the money for ourselves? How can we think about the money that we're going to have to be able to provide for our family, our grandparents, the children after us? We really need to think about how we can teach them, like you guys are already doing, giving them education and awareness, how they can use the money, or things that they never even thought about. about. This is like really just opening up their mind to seeing a new life that they never even thought that they could have. You know, living in poverty, living, you know, low income, every day they're just struggling to think about how they're going to eat or how they're going to get to their job. And this is just opening an opportunity for them to acknowledge that their life will not be like that forever, that their children are going to have a chance to be able to be successful with the funds that you guys are providing. Also, legislation, it's so important to show them and teach them why it's so important to be in legislation, why it's so important to go to the State House, why it's so important to send those emails, to send you know, these things that are happening for them to understand and learn. It's a learning experience for them. You know, a lot of people are taken back when we talk about legislation and getting bills passed, and they just feel like, you know, they're not on the same level that a lot of people here might be. But when they use their voices and they really talk about their own experiences and what they go through, their voices is really what matters. Their voices is really what changes things. It's really what makes it real. It's really what makes it come together. So just having that acknowledgement, to give them that acknowledgement, to let them sit at our table and for them to be there and really celebrate it. Celebrate that we are changing people's lives and we are doing it one person and one life at a time. And having these conversations is really what's going to change people to see that we are listening to them. We want to help them. We want them to get out of poverty. We want children to be successful. We want children to go to college. We want them to have a successful life when they get out of high school. A lot of families are not going to have that, but now they will. Thank you.
Great. And I feel like if we were in person, we'd be giving a big round of applause and cheering you every step of the way. You have embodied in spirit and words and your passion exactly why we're here. So thank you for articulating it. Thank you for bringing it right back to the people, out of jumping those words and statistics and ideas out of a page and into the hands of those that we're trying to empower, which is our future generation. And what a great segue into our next conversation. Because we're talking about this being systemic inequality, and you were talking about bringing this directly into these systems throughout our communities that are both helping, but also the systems that are hurting and the things that are holding our communities back. And so I do want to sort of pose this question back to all of you and say that this program, it's ambitious, it's comprehensive, but we know that it has to partner with other kinds of programs and other efforts to eliminate the wealth gap. And we're really at a critical transition period. We've got a new incoming administration. We've got the start of the legislative season underway. So I'm going to pose it back out to you. What are some additional policy initiatives that we must support to effectively address these structural barriers that are creating issues for social economic mobility, that are barriers to prosperity in Massachusetts? I mean, how does this fit into this larger agenda we have, both for the legislative body, but also for us as an entire Commonwealth? So how does this fit into that larger agenda? And what else can we do to address these barriers? Beth, can I pass this along to you again?
Sure. So the one thing I've been thinking a lot about with the baby bonds is who is going to be best poised to take advantage of these opportunities, and how do we, before the point of the money becoming available, how do we ensure that people are having equal access to quality education, equal access to safe neighborhoods, et cetera, et cetera. And along those lines, I think about some of the things that we know about home values and home assessments and residential segregation and how different things play out. And I think it's a holistic look. I don't think I can point to 3 things that will make this absolutely work or 3 things that absolutely won't. But I think it's looking across our policies, across our practices, with a lens towards wealth disparities and a lens towards how they might play out across the life course and what they might mean.
Great. Thank you, Beth. And I know the Federal Reserve has been engaged in such conversations about how to comprehensively link all of those different factors. And the data that you're providing, the leadership, the elevation of these issues as cross-sectional has been really key. And I remember working with the Federal Reserve and partnering with you in my days as mayor in Fitchburg. And there's been just such tremendous work since. But I'm going to turn it out to you. Lamar, I'm going to have you, oh, actually, Robert, you're ready to go. So I'll have you go next. So what else can we do? What are
I
other
am. Thanks so much, Lisa.
policy initiatives?
Yeah, I think, as we've worked really hard and diligently to bring this baby bonds to fruition, and that's praiseworthy, but we all know it's not a standalone. It would never succeed in and by itself. So two things come to mind. Number one, it has to be wrapped around the existing framework of what is working, other programs in the community. That's the number one thing. And then also looking at those who are feeling or being left behind or falling through the cracks, especially as we watch inflation soar, and just understanding the fact that this is a tool in our toolbox, but without other resources right now. So for example, Gear Up, we serve many of our students in our gateway cities. So we're dealing with homelessness. We're dealing with students who are struggling with food insecurity, and many of those other challenges that are being exacerbated as the wealth gap continues to just widen. So we see baby bonds as a milestone, an important component, a tool in the toolbox, but it's got to be, other things have to expand in order for students to make it those 18 years and be in position to access, to start a business and have the skill set to do that. Obviously, that can be through the educational system and resources that can be brought to bear there. So again, I appreciate the framing of it being holistic, because that's going to be integral to its success. Because we know that from the onset, as Loami mentioned, from thinking about that mother or those parents who are giving birth, or even the expectation of this child, and thinking about that journey all the way along and saying, well, what other support systems are going to be needed along the way? That's going to be integral for us to just take into consideration, both on the policy level and also just on the again in each community. So a lot of work to be done and a lot of collaboration, but I would just go back to two things I guess I'll wrap up with is, number one, a big part of the success of this is going to be building trust in the communities we serve in. And then again, collaboration with those organizations, community-based and statewide, that are already in existence, and leveraging the resources. So thank you. Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you so much. Lamari, I'll pose that question to you. I know the YWCA is doing a tremendous work. I know there are a lot of their programs are wraparound, whether it's housing or economic empowerment, or working with youth. So give us some insight as to what else we can do.
It's about breaking barriers. It's about the challenges that we know that we are gonna face, the things that we know that we cannot stop. We know that there's gonna be poverty. We have challenges with low income, workforce, all of that. But really just coming together like we are right now and looking for the people that are really on our side, that are really gonna help us and give us more knowledge and give us more awareness and give us more education to break those barriers, to stop feeling like we can't do it and just begin to do it. It's about taking action. It's about the leaders coming together and really helping the community the best way that we know how, to continue to speak for them and advocate, like I continue to say, to keep guiding them. This is a chance for them to see that we have been listening, that we know that they're struggling. We know that there's barriers. We know, again, that there's challenges, but we know that we're working around the lines. One thing that I say is, if I can't go through one door, I'm going to go to the other, and I'm going to continue to see how I'm able to help my families, how I'm able to feed them, how I'm able to give them food, money, whatever it is that they need for them to be able to see that we really want them to be successful, to continue to empower them. Give them empowerment. Let them know that this is really going to be for them and not just for us, that they are going to find themselves, that they're going to find that the way that they live is not going to be like that forever, that they're going to be able to understand how to live or how to live different. And it's going to go to generations. What we're doing now is going to help so many people after us. This is a blessing for so many people before us. We're really going to show that everything that people have been fighting for, we are gonna continue to fight, but we really need everybody to be here. We really need organizations, businesses, families, people to really come together and really help us so that this can be successful. This is only, again, going to be a challenge. And I know there's going to be times where people are going to feel like, we can't move on, or there's going to be things that are going to try to stop us, but we just have to keep fighting like we've been fighting. We just have to come together and be stronger to really help and let them grow and see them growing and see how this really is going to change people's life. People are going to see life so much different just knowing that they have a little bit of an income to really change the life of their children. And also for the parents, it's going to change their lives. It's going to want them to want to work harder. It's going to want them to have a saving account. It's going to have them to really be on the same level that their children will be. And they can be proud of that. Some families have never gotten that. So just having that, again, those barriers, not allowing the barriers to stop us, but for us to continue to fight to make a better life. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. I want to echo some of the comments I'm seeing in the chat. Beautifully said, well said. Oftentimes people don't know the programs are available to them. They don't know where the information is. So it's important that we're doing events like this, and it's important that people like the panelists here continue to bring their energy, their ideas, and their support to a program like this. So I'm going to open this up to any questions. I see that there's one question in the chat, and I think maybe Elena, I'll have you help us answer this. How do we kind of define baby bonds, kind of like a baby bonds 101? So if we're taking this and try to make some talking points, what are kind of the quick things we need people to know about?
Sure, that's such a great question. Thank you, whoever asked it. So baby bonds are a significant monetary investment made by the government on behalf of children shortly after birth to be used for future wealth building. So in this case, we are using TAFDC for those children that we make the investment for. And one of the potential impacts of baby bonds, there has been studies on baby bonds, that if a national baby bonds program had been started in the mid 1990s, children from households with wealth in the bottom 20% would have accumulated on average about $45,000. And the wealth gap would have decreased from white households having about the study also indicated that it actually would help close the racial wealth gap as well too. So it is, and this is study statistics from Prosperity Now. So I think this is why the Treasurer's Office is very interested in this type of program.
Great, and thank you, Shira, from Prosperity Now, who actually posted a link to some helpful work that was done by that group. So that's prosperitynow.org/state baby bonds. So lots of great information. Again, in the chat, there was also a question about how this is financed and what the fund withdrawal process is. Elena, while you're on, do you want to just give a quick minute answer to that one?
Sure. And I know, Robert, you actually chaired the subcommittee on the fund withdrawal. Feel free to add anything. But the way that the task force, recommendations would be, the children are automatic. So at the time at age 18 up until age 35, those children who are now adults at that point would have to just show that they're a Massachusetts resident, and would then would be able to show that the funds are being used for appropriate, well-defined asset building activities that we mentioned earlier in the program. So that's really would be the process.
And thanks, Elena. I would just add on our subcommittee 3, and I want to give major kudos to my co-chair, Tom Shapiro out of Brandeis. We really wanted to thread the needle of saying we wanted to obviously make sure the funds were available to the students without unnecessary barriers, and also obviously build in enough protections so that there would be no predatory practices or people seeking to take advantage of students. So we wanted to ensure the fidelity of the program, but at the same time, not create unnecessary barriers for families who may come to the table with a sense of wariness with regards to this whole program, because there's a whole lot of education that's going to take place in order for parents and students to even understand the benefit of this. So thank you so much for asking that question.
Great. We've got another question in the chat. what is the projected amount of dollars each account is projected to grow to by the time the withdrawal age is reached?
So we actually did not attach that amount into the task force report. We do have a couple of different projections. If you give us a minute, we can probably put those into the chat. But we did not attach a dollar amount to the legislation. We're going to work with our legislative partners on that. But the projection will vary depending on the investment that is made at the time.
Can you describe the process for automatic enrollment for DCF children in foster care?
At this time, it'll be automatic for the children that are born under TAFDC and DCF. We're going to be working with DCF to establish that process. So that'll be something that'll be done between the Treasurer's Office and the Department of Children and Families.
Right, I know it's getting close to 1 o'clock, so I just want to thank the panelists, Beth, Robert, and Lamary. It looks like there are other questions that might be coming in. I think hopefully we're able to circle back and get these questions answered. But Elaine, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Thank you, Lisa. And I want to thank all of our presenters today, Treasurer Goldberg, Senator Feeney, Representative Vargas. I know unfortunately had some technical issues, and we do thank him for joining us. I want to thank our panelists, Beth, Robert, and Lamari, for sharing your thoughts on baby bonds, as well as wealth building activities here in Massachusetts. I also want to take this opportunity to thank all of our task force members for their time, lending their skill set, their thoughts on this task force report. We couldn't have done it without them. So I just want to thank each and every one of them for their work on this. And again, we're just getting started. We're now looking towards the 2023-2024 legislative session in order to pass legislation for next year. We're going to work on answering the questions that are in the chat. So we will send out an email answering those questions that are in the chat, as well as having some of the funding projections that were mentioned earlier in the event. If you'd like to follow along with us, our social media handles are up on the screen, and you can also reach out to us via email. Our email address is also on the screen as well too. We want to thank all of you for joining us here today to learn more about proposed baby bonds program here in Massachusetts, and we hope that you enjoy the rest of your day.